Hey ladies and gentlemen, John Caspian here. Today we're going to review Fallout Wasteland Warfare RPG, an expansion pack to the Fallout Wasteland Warfare wargame. So this is a really cool expansion that I've got to dig my fingers into a little bit, play a couple of different sessions of, and I have not unlocked all of the cool things that it has in the game. However, I really enjoy it, and what we're going to do is we're going to do a quick thumb through of the table of contents to show you what all is inside the book if you want to purchase it at Giga-Bites Café. And then I'm going to tell you about my favorite parts, impressions, and then maybe one or two negatives. You know, there's always something for any gamer that might be a negative, who knows, but it's pretty positive in my book. I love it. So let's go ahead and jump on in. Let's switch on over to our table of contents view. So here we have the wonderful book. Inside we have all of the awesome people who worked on this thing, and it is absolutely incredible. So introduction, what is a role-playing game? If you don't know what an RPG is and you're not really into them, this could be a good introduction because it's a great universe and it blends miniature war game with RPG in a really seamless way. Then it talks about section 2. We have the world of the Wasteland. So let me zoom in there a little bit. Yeah, there we go. So you can see the different factions that are involved. So you have the Survivors, which includes the Minutemen. You have the Brotherhood of Steel, which are the folks that want to prevent all of the technology, the high technology from happening. The Raiders, and it talks about different sub-factions of Raiders as well, which is really nice. You also have the Super Mutants, different types of those, because, you know, you have your West Coast Super Mutants, which are considered to be smarter than East Coast. I know this game is supposed to be based in Boston, is the best place because it's all Fallout 4, but you could always do it anywhere you want to as long as you have the factions, right? So then we have the Enclave, and then finally the Institute, and that's the one you encounter in Fallout 4, which is a fairly new faction for anyone who hasn't played Fallout 4. You can read all about them. Then we jump into creating the characters, creating a player character, your skill list, your gifts and scars, which I'll talk about in a minute. But it's really cool that you give your 2 gifts and 2 scars, which is neat. Perks, specialist characters, how luck works, experience and progression, and finally the archetype cards. So basically, you're able to use your RPG character in a game of Fallout Wasteland Warfare, which is so cool. You can use it in a campaign, all kinds of stuff. Then we have the rules of play. So we have your skill tests, special effects, your regular actions that you have, quick actions, which is something that heroic people have, like player characters, minor actions, and then all of the interactions with how damage works, criticals, conditions, advanced combat, etc. And then the next section, number 5, has the Overseer, and you can see all about what the Overseer, and the Overseer is the Game Master, Dungeon Master, so what the role of the Overseer is, how you adjudicate the skill tests, how you deal with the player characters. They have something called the covert approach, which is cool. It's basically stealth mode, like in the video game, which is neat. You have your chase scenes, which is really cool because the way they have it is you line up your range rulers, and then as you get closer to your target, it's like a shorter distance, but you can actually visually represent it, which is really cool. And that way, as you're going through a scene, the Overseer can actually lay out what a chase scene would look like, and that's something that hasn't really been an easy visual for a lot of game systems, and it's really cool to have that. You've got your scavenging, your items and costs. There's a settlement, so if you ever played a settlement system, either single player or as a group, you can actually do the settlements just like you would in a regular Fallout Wasteland Warfare game. You've got your crafting, and that's always cool. You don't have to just get items from the Wasteland. You can actually build your own at your settlement that you hold throughout your campaign. Really cool. Special effect dice, and then playing in conjunction with Wasteland Warfare, which we'll cover in a little bit as well. Then finally, there's an introductory campaign, Mr. Parzival, and then the quest, and then Cameloth. I love it. So this little 3-part campaign that they have to introduce, and that really gives you a feeling for how you can also create your own campaigns. So I've kind of used that as a template for me to create my own Wizard of Oz based campaign, loosely based on Wizard of Oz. Then they have a gallery and the appendices and index and all that stuff. Cool, so let's take a quick look through here. We'll kind of skip past all of the lore information here. We don't really need to see all that, I think. If you need to look any of that stuff up, I recommend getting the book and or looking at, there's a couple of YouTube channels that go into the lore of Fallout, which is absolutely incredible. They have a lot of detailed stuff. Even one guy plays through the game and then gives you all the different options you can do as you're playing. So it talks about West Coast mutants, East Coast mutants, and the difference between the two, how FEV has affected them. On the left-hand side, here's the Raiders. You have Rust Devils, the New Cons, the Pit Raiders, the Pack, all operators, all of that. They even have tactics, so how you can actually utilize those as an overseer and how players can expect them to act in a game outside of just the AI cards. You can still use the AI cards in the game, but you can actually choose as an overseer to have them act a different way. Institute, and then their tactics at the end there. So you even have different organization structures, it says, for the Institute. And then creating a character is really easy to do. So then we have your character sheets, and then they have a character page, which is free to print, for reprint, if you want to. So you get your special stats here on the bottom left. If you haven't seen a Fallout Wasteland Warfare card, it's really simple. Strength, perception, endurance, charisma, intelligence, agility, and luck. And then you have your armor characteristics, which you cannot see. Let me move it down here. There we go. You can see your armor values down there, and a couple of different things. And every time there's a color or a different symbol, that's the range of that. So that, for instance, his charisma there is his leadership, and it's a red range. So then you know that you use the red ruler for that. Really easy. So here on the top area, as you're creating your player character, you have your archetype card, which we'll show in a minute here. Your expertise, you add 2 gifts, and then add 2 scars. And then you add your 5 experience points, which you can use to purchase perks, add specialties, or in this case, speciality, as Obi-Wan would say, and our British friends. Then you have your archetype that you put on your mat. So it's really easy. You actually put the cards onto this 8.5 by 11 mat. It's really cool. And it says here, existing Fallout characters as well. So if you want to use one of your cards from an existing character, you can actually do it with the Overseer's discretion, because they have their archetypes kind of balanced for the RPG to begin with. And then you have your heroic stuff. And this is important for people who have not really played a lot of Wasteland Warfare. There's 2 types of characters. There are heroic characters and models, and then there are non-heroic. And the non-heroic are your basic AI, if you think about it that way. They're not special named, they're just called Raider. And so those do not get special minor actions and special actions that they can do, which are laid out in this section here. So that is your creating character first page there. And then they have a whole bunch of different abilities and archetypes. So they have things like Fixer, Forager, Pilot, Researcher, Sniper, Technician, Thug, Mr. Handy, Robot. So you can have a player playing as a Mr. Handy Robot, which to me is awesome. You can play as a Super Mutant, Robot, a Ghoul. The Overseer has to kind of make sure you clear that with the Overseer, because if you're a Ghoul and no one else is, then you can have problems with certain interactions. But those are your basic archetypes. And then look at the list of expertise skills on the left-hand side here. So all of those expertise skills are pretty cool. So with a skill list, you have your fundamental things like strength and perception, which are your overall capabilities. And then your more specific skills such as, like over here, notice or persuade or pilot or presence. So you have very specific skills that are used in specific instances or circumstances, and the more specific it is, the more it's considered a expertise skill. So if you're not really well trained in that, you have a penalty. I think it's -4 to all your stuff. So then it goes into all of those different things, and this book is chock full and very well organized, in my opinion, to be able to find all your gifts here on the left-hand side, like dodge, dead aim. So for instance, bright-eyed, you just gain 1 perception. So if you want to boost your stat line, there you go. Boost your perception. Competitive, you gain a +2 bonus to opposed tests. An opposed test is anything where you go head-to-head with somebody, so that's pretty cool. And then your scars might be something over here like addiction. You might be addicted to chems to start the campaign, and then you could always figure out, how do I deal with the addiction and all that stuff. Or you're a dullard, which so you lose 1 intelligence. It's all kinds of cool stuff. All kinds of very interesting possibilities for role-playings. You have your perks over here. So, for instance, you can give attack dog up here in the top. So then you can give it dogs the ability to injure limbs. Very cool. And it also gives you what your special dice do. So you have your regular D20, but it's effectively like a D10-ish dice. And you have your special dice there that do different things based on what kind of bonuses they give you. So look at all these different perks that you can get, and these are just dozens of them. Then you have your specialist characters. So for instance, there's robots that you can have and or handle. There's dogs, and there's a dog handler specialist. And then the luck system, and that's really cool because oftentimes you can flip a little luck token, and then if it lands face up, your 50-50 chance has worked, and then you can do stuff. So then there's different odds and different things you can do with your luck dice. Then you have your experience and progression. So then you have your expertise skills, specialty skills, and perks. So if you add a certain amount of experience, you can buy certain things with that. You can increase your combat skills, and some characters can specialize if they want to. Other characters might want to broaden out. Just depends. Very cool. So expertise and progression there. And this is what I was talking about earlier with the archetype cards. So then you have like Fixer over here and Pilot and Researcher. And so they have all of their different stat lines. And these in particular are balanced for the RPG versus the Wasteland Warfare game. But you could take these, once you get your gifts and scars, you could take this and put it into the regular game. And then this part right here, which I will see if I can zoom in a little bit on for you, is our game mat, which you can print out. So then the top line over here has our health bar, which this is specifically used for the RPG. Then you have your drinks and chems. Then you have any other special effects that might be happening, so crushed limbs if you're on fire, dehydration, stun, bleeding. Then you have your heroic, so this tells you that what your heroic stuff can do. You would put your card on here, just like that. Any weapons you have, your improvised weapon, which is always there, and then I think your top weapon is the one that's equipped currently, so I think it's a quick action to change them out. Your perks and specialities and gifts and scars there. And then we have our different attributes, which are our skills. So you start off with everything at -4 with your basic skills, and then you fill that in, which gives you a bonus black die. So not only do you take away the -4, but you actually get a bonus with the black die when you roll that skill test. Very cool, very cool. And then we're going to skip past all the rules to play, because I think if you want to learn how to play the game, then you should definitely read through this and or watch some gameplay videos if you really want to learn how the game works. But effectively, it's a 20-sided die with numbers 2 through 10. Then you have criticals, which give you auto hits, and sometimes you have criticals with bonus actions attached, and then fails with bonus actions. So like you can see here, critical icon there. So if you want to learn how to play it through the rules and figure out how all that stuff works, I highly recommend go ahead and watch some videos. The folks at Modifius have, the good folks there have made awesome gameplay videos. And you can see here when we measure everything, it's done with the specific rulers, which is really easy to use when you combine the RPG with the Fallout Wasteland Warfare system. So it's all the same, but there might be some differences, so just note those if they're there. But it is considered an expansion to the game, so you shouldn't have to change too much in order to do the RPG. So you've got all kinds of different actions, like your melee move over here. You can prepare, which is like a standby or Overwatch, using your expertise, like hacking a computer. There's different types of things like reactions, and here's a full thing about quick actions, which is super nice. I found that is kind of the fun part about having heroic characters. In Wasteland Warfare, they cost points if you play skirmish type match. And then here we talk about damage in the RPG sense. So basically what you do is you fill in cross out lines, and then if you get radiation, you'd fill in lines there. So then you're using this top bar for the RPG since you have more health there compared to the regular Wasteland Warfare. And that is that. Any other sections here on there? Armor is a very interesting system that maybe later I might do a how to play later on about, especially that armor, because it's a little confusing at first, but once you get it, it's pretty intuitive. Well, I suppose that would be learned versus intuitive. Yeah, you have your health, which is different. If you play the regular Wasteland Warfare, you have this little Endurance 5, the little heart icon. So some people's health is actually not just the icon. Wherever that icon is your health. So in the case of this character right there, you'd have high health inside the regular Wasteland Warfare game. But if you're your RPG character, then don't have to worry about that too much. That is very nice. You've got criticals and radiation that you have to deal with inside the Wasteland. Conditions are interesting in the RPG. They can be long-lasting. So in a campaign game, in Wasteland Warfare, you can also have long-lasting conditions, but you really have to think about how it affects your characters in an RPG. So when you do have an instance where you break your leg, it's not just, okay, let me pay credits or, cast a spell. You might be living with a broken leg for a little while, so you can't jump over, 3-foot gaps or 6-foot gaps very easily compared to characters that don't have a broken leg. So there's all kinds of interesting interactions there that are going to be unique to the RPG that are really going to feel compared to the Wasteland Warfare base game. Then you have your advanced combat, which is really useful. You have things like, I think it's War Cry or Battle Cry abilities, which kind of shocks your enemies when you charge in. Super mutants have that a lot. They're brutes, and they're really big characters, like the massive super mutant gets that. Deathclaw gets it, area of effect. And you have all of these, and these, when you have certain icons that you're not sure what they do exactly, you want to look around for here, and it's going to show you in the advanced combat section what they do. So like miniguns have a very specific rule that you fire 5 different rolls, and if you keep them all on the same target, you eat away at their armor. So it's very cool I think it's walked fire down at the bottom here. It's a very cool ability there. Missile launcher. So you have all kinds of different effects here. And then you have your items and your different reactions. So in Wasteland Warfare, we have cards, a whole bunch of smaller cards. So then you can actually collect these, have them in your settlement, take them with you on your adventures. So if you happen to be a chem addict and you need to have all of your chems, you take those and prioritize those over more useful things, such as, stim packs. You might want to take that, whatever chem you might be taking at the time. Diminishing effect. So, for instance, you have power armor that degrades over time. So if you're playing as a Brotherhood of Steel faction and you're having an outpost in this area of Boston, and that's your basis of your campaign, how do you deal with only having one set of power armor? What happens if you get your power armor damaged? Do you go scavenging outside of your power armor? When do you use your power armor? There's so many possibilities. Turrets, fixed defenses, so as you build up through your campaign, you can have all of those added things, and it gives you rules for everything, which is really nice. And the Overseer, basically showing you how to adjudicate rules, doing skill tests, thinking about what dice to add where. So I talked earlier about the bonus dice, and black dice give you extra damage typically, or the green dice you're more likely to succeed because they'll have -1 and -2, which increases your odds of succeeding in your roll. Yeah, so it's cool stuff like that, and it gives you an idea of how to mold skill tests and interactions between NPCs and characters. So it's very cool there. Factors, that appear. Factors affecting skill tests, setting expertise tests, so how hard something is, how hard should it be. Some people use skill tests and things like that to railroad people a little bit, but it could just be one of those things where you want it to be rewarding if they can figure out a way to do it, which is a way of not necessarily railroading, but making it worth the effort. Because if everything's too easy, then what's the point, right? Has to be some challenge. And it tells you things like if you have skill tests or opposed skill tests where people are maybe both trying to accomplish the same thing, how they can both succeed or one can fail. How some people have advantage, which is up here, advantage during action play, disease and sickness, 0 health and incapacitation, how to deal with that, having luck points, which is something you can accumulate. It's very cool. NPCs, the covert approach, which is all about stealth, which is really cool. I like that a lot, the covert thing. It's nice. You have alertness levels, so it's almost like in Metal Gear Solid, where they have the asterisk on their head, so they're kind of aware of you. Have to be cautious. Surprise attacks, covert manual dexterity, like picking a lock while stealthed. So it has all that stuff in there, which is really nice. Then you have chase scenes, which I mentioned earlier, but it gives you exactly what to do. Like, if you succeeded in acrobatics, you might gain a distance or lose a distance. And you can give your players choices. So in this case, it suggests, like, give them two choices. One is the way to have an effect, either positive or negative, and the other way might be play it safe. Like, if you have a door, you could just go around the building or bust through the door. What happens if you don't bust through the door? You might hit the door, not go through, and then have to go around anyway, so you'd lose distance. There'd be more distance between you and the target. So it kind of gives you a layout of that. Gives you examples of how to scavenge and let players scavenge, maybe without getting too overpowered too quickly. Because sometimes if there's too much stuff, they accumulate it really quickly, and before you know it, they're OP. So then items and costs, and these are slightly different from the regular Wasteland Warfare. This is, I think, balanced toward the RPG. So again, thinking things separate a little bit, because once you add on the RPG element, it's going to be a little different story. Then you have the Overseer section of these settlements. So location, type, defenses, power, and water, and living conditions like bed, maintenance, costs, crafting, and scrapping. I mean, it's everything you can think of. It's great. Traders and supply routes. And then adding in new recruits, which is interesting because you could take in new recruits with you in your missions as NPC allies. Crafting system, things that you can craft, cannot craft. And then your special effect dice. And this one is really important for anyone that wants to run the game in terms of your odds. So adding in your odds of adding in effect dice and all that stuff. And if you can kind of memorize that chart a little bit, it helps out a lot. And then play 100. Playing in conjunction with Fallout Wasteland Warfare. So basically, things that you don't use or are different when playing with the RPG. So for instance, it says all the cards can be used in conjunctions, or in conjunction. Then the tokens in Wasteland Warfare can be used on archetype or unit, or next to models, to show the related effects, rather than tracking those effects by other means. So you can use your tokens. And then it has differentiations of, like, different card types, right, and what they can do. And then it has your introductory campaign. And then your campaign there is just the summary, all that part. If you don't want to spoil that for yourself, you want someone else to run the campaign, I'll go ahead and skip through that since we don't want too much. And then it has some examples of paintwork that you can use. And I've used this for some of my models. And when I want to make them look a certain way, like the super mutants, I want them to have a certain green look. I try to emulate that from the book. And that is that wonderful book. You can purchase that at Giga-Bites Café. I put the cover right there. Role-playing game, tabletop storytelling in the wasteland. Just like that. So my thoughts, having run a couple of games of that, I definitely want to run some more, for sure. So it is absolutely wonderful. I like the fact that you play that with Fallout Wasteland Warfare in the base game. I think it's super nice. I think having all of these options that you can look through, that always gives players more and more. So having all of the different sections, having the rules of play inside the RPG is actually nice. I don't mind that. I think for the most part they could have done without as much, maybe, because you have the rules of play, but you can play this without having the base game if you want to. You could play it theater of mind, where you're not having physical models. So that's definitely a possibility there. Yeah, it's really nice. So I have my players play through a game, and because they're seeing everything in the exact way that it is in the miniatures game, I could balance it a lot easier than I was expecting to. Sometimes you think that your adventure is going to be difficult, or maybe it ends up being too easy, but because everything has a cost association, I was able to make my characters cost approximately 400 credits worth. It was 3 players, and then have them have 400 credits worth of equipment and characters and all that. And then I had my enemies around the same, so I could actually have them all costed and balanced based off of that, versus generic, like, challenge rating and stuff like that, and those systems in D&D. So I really like that. I like having you have to have scars, so you have to have negatives, and oftentimes people try to diminish that by min-maxing and making sure that their characters are the absolute best that they can be. But the point of Fallout is not to be the best. It is about making something interesting and surviving and seeing what you can do. So having different scars, especially the scars that involve like a secret or something, or someone is chasing after you, or maybe you owe someone money or something. So versus just a physical thing. But even if you have just a simple physical problem, it's cool that you can have that have an effect. So if someone might actually look at you and react poorly to you because you have a massive physical deformation, right? They might think that you're diseased or something's wrong with you just because you maybe a birth defect or anything like that. Cool stuff, like maybe you're turning into a ghoul, and so that has its own negatives. Yeah, overall, it's a very nice game. So if you're interested in playing that, I highly recommend picking that up. Join our Facebook groups. We have our Fallout, Wasteland Warfare Warriors of Atlanta. You can join that group. You can also join our larger Giga-Bites tabletop and board gaming group. The links are in the description of this video. So I highly encourage joining those groups and getting to know some folks in the area and playing some games. I think it's cool. We should get a campaign going at Giga-Bites. It'd be really fun to have some role-playing with the campaign system. I think it'd be really good. So yeah, let me know your thoughts, what you think. I hope this was a very useful video for you, and I'll see y'all in the next video. Goodbye.